There is a documented neurological mechanism that degrades your ability to make financial decisions, and you are very likely activating it every time you consume financial news. It is not inflation. It is not interest rates. It is not your portfolio manager. It is a word, nocebo. And the science behind it is considerably more unsettling than most financial commentary will ever acknowledge. The nocebo effect was first documented in clinical medicine. Give a patient a sugar pill and tell them it causes side effects, and a statistically significant number will report those side effects. No active compound. Just expectation. The brain processes anticipated harm using largely the same systems it uses for actual harm. This video asks one question: what happens when that mechanism encounters a modern financial media environment specifically engineered to produce threat responses? Not whether the economic news is accurate. Whether consuming it is making you cognitively worse at handling money. In medicine, nocebo, from the Latin meaning, I will harm, is the induction of adverse outcomes through negative expectation alone. It is not disputed fringe science. It is a reproducible finding documented across clinical trials on multiple continents, though effect sizes vary considerably across contexts and populations. Patients warned of side effects report them at rates measurably above control groups, even when the compound involved is inert. The mechanism is neurological. The brain's threat detection architecture does not always cleanly distinguish between a perceived threat and an actual one. When the amygdala, the brain's primary alarm system, registers danger, it initiates a cascade, cortisol release, elevated heart rate, and the systematic suppression of functions deemed non-essential for immediate survival. Research on stress and financial risk, including work by Mather and Lighthall on how acute stress narrows attention toward threatening stimuli, is consistent with this activation pattern, amygdala engagement followed by reduced prefrontal regulatory capacity. The precise chain in financial contexts remains an area of active study, not a settled mechanism. And the prefrontal cortex is where financial thinking lives. Long-term planning. Risk calibration. The evaluation of probabilities. Impulse control. The cognitive architecture of sound financial decision-making resides in exactly the region that the stress response is designed to shut down. The implication is uncomfortable. A sufficiently threatening financial news environment may be degrading the very machinery you need to respond to it. In 1979, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky published research that introduced prospect theory, a framework describing how people actually make decisions under uncertainty, as opposed to how classical economics assumed they did. Central to their findings was loss aversion. Kahneman and Tversky found that people exhibit a consistent asymmetry. The pain of losing a sum of money appears to be roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining an equivalent amount, in many experimental contexts. Subsequent meta-analyses have shown this ratio varies considerably, from approximately 1.5 to over 2.5, depending on stakes levels, individual differences, and domain. The directional finding is robust, the precise magnitude is context-dependent. Then, in 1981, Tversky and Kahneman extended this work by examining how the framing of identical decisions could shift choices. The content of the decision was held constant. The framing, as a gain or as a loss, reliably altered behavior. Risk-averse under one framing. Risk-seeking under another. Identical information. Different outcomes. Now combine those two findings with a media ecosystem that delivers financial information almost exclusively through a loss frame, markets fall, assets decline, wealth erodes, and you have a structural problem. Loss-framed information activates a cognitive bias that Kahneman and Tversky demonstrated is already operating at roughly double the intensity of its counterpart. The financial news environment is not neutral data delivery. It is loss-framed input into a system already calibrated to overweight loss. If this kind of evidence-grounded analysis of financial behavior is useful to you, subscribe now. This channel covers the neuroscience of wealth, no motivation, no gurus, just the documented science of how financial decisions actually get made inside the human brain. Not all negative emotional states produce identical financial behavior. This distinction is precise in the research, and it is almost entirely absent from conventional financial advice. Work by Jennifer Lerner and Dr. Keltner, published in 2000, examined how specific emotions, particularly fear and anger, produce distinct effects on judgment and choice. Fear is characterized by uncertainty and low perceived control. Anger is characterized by certainty and high perceived control. These are cognitively opposite states, despite both being colloquially labeled as negative. Lerner and Keltner found that these different emotional profiles systematically alter risk assessments and decision tendencies. Financial news that generates fear, unpredictable threat, perceived loss of control, unresolvable uncertainty, produces a different and arguably more damaging decision profile than information that produces frustration. People in a fear state, the research indicates, tend toward pessimistic forecasting and risk avoidance. The practical consequence in financial terms: deferred investment decisions, flight to perceived safety, reduced financial activity at precisely the moments when historically, measured action has been most valuable. This is the mechanism that connects a financial media environment to actual financial outcomes. It is not that the news makes you sad. It is that specific emotional states induced by specific information framings appear to systematically bias the decisions you make afterward, and the bias runs in a consistent direction. Here is the part that conventional financial commentary almost never addresses. Evidence in this area indicates that exposure to these mechanisms is not equal across the population. And the implications for who builds wealth and who does not are structurally significant. In 2007, economists Anna Maria Lusardi and Olivia Mitchell published research examining the relationship between financial literacy and stock market participation. Their finding was direct: individuals with higher financial literacy are substantially more likely to participate in stock markets. The research was not framed as a nocebo study. But the structural implication connects precisely to the mechanism we have been examining. Lusardi and Mitchell did not study threat response or cortisol. But the structural implication is plausible: a person who understands market volatility as a statistically documented feature of long-term equity investing may process an identically threatening news signal through a fundamentally different cognitive framework than someone without that context. This buffering hypothesis is consistent with separate bodies of evidence in cognitive appraisal research, though it has not been directly tested in the Lusardi-Mitchell study design. The threatening signal arrives. But the interpretation, and therefore the physiological response, differs. This is consistent with broader research on how domain expertise modulates perceived threat. It also points toward a specific mechanism by which financial disadvantage can become self-reinforcing. Those with fewer resources are frequently less able to access rigorous financial education. Less financial literacy correlates, the evidence suggests, with greater susceptibility to anxiety-driven financial decision-making. That anxiety activates the stress response. The stress response impairs the prefrontal function needed to build financial knowledge and execute sound decisions. The cycle does not require conscious awareness to complete. It runs at the level of neurobiology. In 2009, economists George Akerlof and Robert Schiller published work exploring how psychological factors, what they termed animal spirits, influence economic decision-making and shape market outcomes. Their argument, grounded in extensive economic evidence, was that confidence, fear, narrative, and expectation are not peripheral to economic activity. They are constitutive of it. An expectation of recession, transmitted at sufficient scale through media, can itself produce the behavioral changes, reduced spending, deferred investment, hoarded liquidity, that generate recessionary conditions. The individual nocebo response, aggregated across millions of simultaneous media consumers, becomes a systemic mechanism. Your personal stress response to threatening financial news is not isolated. It is one instance of a population-level response. And the aggregate of those individual responses, reduced risk tolerance, deferred financial action, increased defensive financial behavior, produces measurable changes in the broader economy. Separately, Barbaras and Thaler, in their comprehensive 2003 literature review of behavioral finance, synthesized the accumulated evidence on how psychological biases distort investment decisions and market dynamics at scale. It is a survey of others' findings, not original empirical research, but as a synthesis, it remains one of the most cited frameworks in the field. The individual story and the market story are not parallel narratives. They are the same mechanism operating at different scales. Conventional wisdom says stay informed. The research says be precise about how. 3 interventions emerge from the evidence reviewed here. First, timing. The stress response has a physiological arc with measurable duration. Consuming threatening financial information immediately before making financial decisions compounds any impairment. Deliberately separating news consumption from financial decision-making by time, hours, not minutes, allows the stress response to resolve before the prefrontal cortex is required to function at full capacity. Second, active reframing. Tversky and Kahneman demonstrated that identical information framed differently produces different decisions. This is not positive thinking. It is deliberate cognitive translation, processing news by asking what it describes structurally, stripped of its emotional loading. What is the base rate? What is the historical precedent? What would this look like in 5 years? Third, literacy as inoculation. Lusardi and Mitchell's data points to a practical intervention with documented effects, building genuine domain expertise in the areas where you make financial decisions. The threat signal still arrives. But expertise appears to modulate the interpretation, which modulates the response. None of this requires ignoring financial reality. It requires understanding that your brain is not a neutral information processor. It is an evolved threat detection system that was calibrated for an environment that did not include 24-hour financial media. Working with that architecture, rather than pretending it does not exist, is what the evidence actually supports. The nocebo effect is not a metaphor. It is a documented mechanism. Negative expectation, induced by information, by framing, by a sustained media environment optimized for threat salience, activates neural architecture that measurably impairs the cognitive functions required to respond well to financial challenges. Kahneman and Tversky documented the loss aversion asymmetry. Lerner and Keltner mapped how fear specifically shapes judgment. Lusardi and Mitchell identified financial literacy as a buffer. Akerlof and Schiller demonstrated that these individual responses aggregate into economic events. The question is not whether this is happening. The question is whether you are consuming financial information in a way that accounts for it. Subscribe to this channel. New research breakdowns on the neuroscience of financial decision-making every week. The next video in this series examines why financial stress impairs working memory, and what the evidence says about interrupting that cycle before it compounds.